It's Catherine Williamson, and this is Gobsmacked, episode 21. And I'm joined today with Oliver Hodgson.
Hello, how are you, Catherine?
Well, today's a bit of a first for us, isn't it, Ollie? Because we are actually being videoed and filmed at the same time as Gobsmacked. So whilst we get that nervousness out of the way, but Oliver, how do I know you?
How do you know me? Gosh, 2 words, Gary McKee.
Yeah. So the last time I saw you on the telly, you were at the Brit Awards on the red carpet. But up to that, for the last 2 years, you and I have met at some ridiculous hours in the morning while Gary McKee's been doing his 365 marathon run. None of it was particularly glamorous, was it? But that's how we met.
Yeah.
So explain your connection to Gary.
That is how we met, yeah. So when Gary McKee and I met in December 2021, a couple of weeks before he was set to begin the biggest challenge of his lifetime, and probably one of the biggest challenges of anybody's personal endurance in the world, I think. My company, Platinum Live, we said we would support him however we could. That was all around his PR, his media and his messaging. And then, yeah, from January 2022, it was just crazy. I think we met towards early summer. Mm-hmm. I think it was kind of May, June time. And I kept looking over and I think, oh, who's this lovely lady? You always dress very fabulously. And you didn't look like you were from West Cumbria, that's for sure. And people always said about this Mrs. Bouquet. And I was like, who's Mrs. Bouquet? Because your second name was Williamson. But yeah, it was always at crazy hours. It could be at 5:30 waiting for BBC Breakfast to go live. And there's sat trucks all over Sanderson Drive and the neighbours playing hell and running around. It was brilliant. We've had some memories.
Well, we have. Do you remember famously on one of the BBC News where the chap emptied his bins in his underpants? It's been as glamorous as that.
Yeah, that's when the saying any press is good press, because that landed in just about every tabloid going in the country. So it gave the Gary Challenge some unexpected peaking coverage in June last year. But yeah, that was interesting.
So I want to cut straight to your Gobsmack moment, because from that point onwards, I think it'll explain why I'm so keen to interview you today. So tell me your Gobsmack moment, that point in your life where you went onto an alternative trajectory. What was it for you?
I think it's when I, came out of school. So I left school early. I left school in year 10. I was 15, and that was very uncanny. Not many people leave school at that time, and I left because I basically had 4 years of torment and bullying, and I was a very ill and depressed teenager, and now we've come on leaps and bounds. I'm a much different person. The fact I'm sat in this studio with you is so different to the person I was 4 years ago. That was definitely my Gobsmack moment, and it's when I said, you know what, I'm not going to have a single GCSE, I'm not going to have anything, I'm not going to have an A-level. How am I going to make this work? And I knew for years, since I was 7, 8, 9, when I was watching The Apprentice and Dragon's Den and all these TV shows, that I was just obsessed with media and marketing. Like, I was obsessed with it. And every time there was a camera in the village in Gosford, or every time, Greg James once came through one of his charity challenges, I was obsessed. I was like asking so many questions with the producers and everything. And I just became absolutely connected to this world. All I had was passion. I don't have anything. I don't have a degree. I don't have rich parents. I don't have any qualifications. I have nothing other than experience in a portfolio. But when I was leaving school, I also had nothing.
So you're 15 years of age. You've been consistently bullied. School is not your happy spot. You're now 19 years of age. And that's the bit that I always find so gobsmacking about you. It's impossible to imagine your age, because you feel to me like such a travelled old soul. And you're now heading up your own company, aren't you, Platinum Live? You've got £1 million contracts. You're associated with companies like Sky and Porsche. And you are, for me, what Gen Z is all about. Because there's a statistic that absolutely rocks me, which is in 2025, 25% of the workforce globally will be Generation Z, which means if you're between 13 and 27 now, you're Gen Z. So you sort of speak in or dispute some of the classic stigma attached to your generation, don't you? So you work shy, entitled, those sort of words are attached to you, but you have grafted, haven't you, for what you've got today? So when I say Gen Z to you, how do you respond to that?
Definitely, and I understand why there is so much stigma attached to it. My granddad turns on Good Morning Britain in the morning, and here's another Gen Zer complaining about how hard the world is, when in reality, it isn't that difficult compared to 50, 60 years ago. And a lot of things are a lot easier with technology and things. But I'm not one of those. I believe in working hard. I believe in you get what you put in. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, and it's up to us how we utilize that. And we're all in different circumstances. I've come to understand that, but I'm one of those Gen Zers who will get up and go, and if I want something, I'm going to make it damn happen. But there is the other side of my generation, which I think, to be honest, you come across in all sorts of generations. But I think with the rise in social media, this generation is getting really quite bad at showing the negative side of them, which is the entitled behaviour, and I expect this, and I expect to be 4-day week and hardly work and get my pay package, and I want a constant promotion for little output, whereas I'll put in maximum output for maximum return, and that's how I go about my business. And I do like to separate myself from the mainstream narrative of what Gen Z is. But I do think we get a lot of hard press. I do, and I think it's a shame, because there is some fantastic people among my peers.
Of course there is. My 2 kids are both Gen Zers, and I'm a very one-eyed parent, but they've got incredible work ethic. And I mean, every generation is defined, and every generation has people that dispute that. But you're the only generation that has been entirely with the internet. So you're a digital age generation. And I think part of that entitlement thing is so wrong, because there is an expectation to come to work and work from 9 to 5 a lot more. But I think it's because in the 80s, when we were out drinking all the Bollinger and having a high old time, your generation's got our hangover. But you know how to work smarter, because you've got the technology, and that's the world you've been raised on.
Definitely, I agree with the whole work smarter, not harder as well. I work all sorts of hours. I'm very nocturnal as well. I actually have in my LinkedIn bio, it says born after Google. I've never experienced life without internet and everything being so fast paced, and being able to order whatever you want for tomorrow, or being able to have global connections. I'm on Zoom calls all the time every week with people all over the place, whether they be in LA, Australia, or in Mumbai when we were sending Gary out to Mumbai. My connections grow by the week, and they grow on a global scale of some really credible people. And that is thanks to LinkedIn and Google, so that is the privilege that I have. I always argue that everybody has some sort of privilege, and mine is that, I'm not from a silver spoon background, but I'm also not from a hard up background. But also I've got a phone. That is the biggest gift any Gen Zer can have now. If you have a phone and an internet connection, my gosh, can you do some crazy stuff, and can you help your career massively? So
we've possibly breezed through the statement that you said that you were bullied for 4 years. Because something in terms of the temperament that you were born with, the gifts and talents that you've got, and what you've achieved so young, there must have been some resilience or some qualities of character you must develop to get through that, but then decide enough is enough. I mean, is there gold in the dark for you of that experience, would you say?
Yeah, look, I mean, when I first joined secondary school, it was 2015, and I was bullied pretty much from day one. And I was constantly reassured that it would get better and things would change and your peers will become more accepting. That was never the case. It got worse and worse and worse, to the point where there was graffiti on the doors, and I was pushed and shoved in the corridors, and I was having constant anonymous phone calls. It wasn't from everybody, but obviously in that moment you felt like everybody hated you. And on reflection, it was because I was different. I wasn't running around a rugby pitch, I wasn't running around a football pitch, but I was the head of communications at the local professional rugby league club 2 years later. I don't play sport, but I accept that it's a fantastic industry, and there's some really, really cool, fantastic people in it. But because of West Cumbrian, the way of the land there, it's you're either this or you're not. And if you're not that, you're gay, or you're something else, or you're some other crazy insult. And I just got that for 4 years. And it was often from people older than me. So when I was in year 7 and year 8, it was from 18-year-olds in sixth form who were like 6 foot. But then when I was in year 9 and year 10, it was from cocky year 7s who didn't learn that you respect your elders. And I always say, I'm very truthful, that I was being bullied, and probably as a result, I was a bit of a bully myself. I often would say things to people that I wouldn't ordinarily say, and I think that is the issue, the damaging issue of bullying is that it turns other people often quite toxic, or more so where they have an opinion and they're going to let that person know. I agree with everybody having opinions, but I think it's, sometimes you have to rein it in and not let everybody know exactly what you think of them, because it might hurt their feelings and have a detriment impact. But it definitely turned me into a bit of a difficult person anyways. It was messing with my head that people couldn't accept me. So whenever somebody done something I don't agree with, I'd let them know about it. And I regret that, but it was also now, it's part of developing my character and who I am today. And I would like to think I'm a much more accepting person, and I love everybody. I'm a people person.
Oh, you're a raging people, but that's your gift, isn't it? You just weave in and out of people's lives, and you've got a really charismatic, uplifting energy. And I think because your company is PR and communication, isn't it? So if you can't communicate and you can't win people over, you're really dead in the water with that job, haven't you? But you are crap in those 4 years of survival. And just surviving in that system, that's going to knock the corner. It's like pebble polishing, isn't it? That's going to knock the edges off, because you've come out the other side. I mean, did you just literally say at 15, I'm out, I'm off? How does that work?
Pretty much. I mean, it was Christmas of 2019, early 2019, or was it earlier then? No, it was Christmas of 2019. That I really kind of broke down. Sorry, no, I've got that wrong. It was December 2018, because 2019 was the Christmas before COVID. It was December 2018. I became very ill, and it was affecting my family life. I was very depressed. I would go home off the school bus and take it out on my parents that I got called X, Y, and Z, and it was becoming very toxic and unpleasant for everybody. And they said, I'm not going back to school. So that January and February of 2019, the doctor had signed me off school for a few weeks, and then kind of once that note reached its expiry, school were very adamant that they needed me back in, and they started doing the usual, we'll take your parents to court, this isn't on, you need to come and do your GCSEs, we're trying to help you with all this bullying. And, the school did try and help me, but you can't go around putting gaffer tape on people's mouths. So I went back towards the end of February, and I, spent another 3-4 months there until early summer, and it was the worst 3 or 4 months I've ever had in school. I was misbehaving with teachers, I was arguing with teachers, everybody was calling me things, I was really, really struggling, and then kind of early summer, that's kind of end of June, beginning of July 2019, I just said, I've had enough, and I turned very defiant, and I said, I am not going to school. Unless you pick me up and drag me into school, I am not putting that tie on, and I am not going to a place where people hate me and I don't feel safe.
There's no psychological safety in that setup, is there?
No, I said, I was refusing to go. I said, you're going to have to drag me kicking and screaming. And trust me, my parents tried that and it didn't work. But then also the flip side of that is I would go in without my uniform to sit around a board table with very senior people from the local authority, my GP and the senior people at the school, without my uniform on, crying in front of a load of senior people who were telling me I must come and do my GCSEs. But then I had a select group of people who were like, no, this kid is poorly, and this environment is making him very ill. And I remember saying things like, it was less than a year to go for my GCSEs, and says, you're doing them next April, da 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 da. And I says, I don't know whether I'm going to be here next April. All of this that I'm being put through, all of this process and this system that just doesn't fit everybody, and the environment. I mean, gosh, if you work somewhere, you're in a workplace and you feel so uncomfortable and your anxiety is through the roof and you go red every time you bump into a certain person, you're not going to work there, or you're at least going to raise it with HR and it gets sorted, or you move on, or you move to a different area of the company, or you move to a different office. That was never an option. Obviously, it was never an option. And I then became, I'm not going to school, and I accepted I'm not going to have any GCSEs, and I said to myself, I'm going to make that work, and I'm going to prove people wrong, And I come from a family who that's never happened to before. All my parents went to school and done their A levels and whatnot. My sisters are uni educated, both got degrees. I have nothing, and I said to myself, I'm going to make this work. None of my parents have ever run a business. Nobody in my family ever has. A lot of them are public sector jobs. My mum works in the fire service, and I think she's an absolutely fantastic inspiration. And my dad works at Sellafield. I had nothing. I had no upper kind of
role model for being a maverick or an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it was like, you're going to have to really graft here, Oliver. And then, anyway, so I came out of school completely. They signed me off the register. I think it was October, November 2019 time. And then, technically I was homeschooled for quite a few months. And then I got offers of apprenticeships from various people. But before I go on to that, what I will say is Trudy Harrison, who is my local MP, she was fantastic. She's probably, I will always support that woman because what she done for me is exactly, I think, the role of an MP. She really supported me. She came out and we discussed with the school and parents and, what's going on and looked at all the options. And ultimately, I think Trudy's influence is what made my dad say, yeah, we'll take you out of school then. And so I owe a lot to her because, this might sound a bit dramatic, but she probably saved me in many ways. She saved me from ruining myself. I'm not talking about the extreme of that. I'm talking about saving me from putting me through absolute hell and putting me into a system which was going to churn out another worker, not another entrepreneur. Because I can remember talking to a careers coach as well when I was in probably year 9, early year 10. So 14, 15? I wanted to be an entrepreneur in the media industry, I said, and the answer was, that doesn't happen to people from around here.
Oh my word.
Let's look at the qualifications you need to get a good apprenticeship in communications at one of the big companies. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't think you quite understand. I want to work for myself and I want to hire people and grow a fantastic business that gives back and do some really cool work. Yeah, Oliver, but we need to obviously earn that.
Crush your dreams, Oliver, today.
Crush my dreams. Yeah, and she was very, you need to earn your stripes, and my entitled Gen Z-ness came out of me and says, I'm not earning my stripes. I'm going to go out and build a business from day one, whether you like it or not. So, that's one thing I guess I've always had is arrogance in that sense, in that I'm going to do it. And, and I also accept that we'll make mistakes along the way and we'll fail. And I failed school. And I'm not bothered. It doesn't faze me.
Don't you think school failed you, Oliver?
Yeah, school probably failed. Or more so the system, because I had some fantastic teachers.
Oh, that's
some
brilliant.
Teachers who really shaped me, especially my English teachers. And they've done a lot for me. And I will say the school I went to did bend over backwards. I think it was just too late. I think for me personally, I was past the moment of going back into school. I said, I'm done. This is it. This has gone on since 2015. How long can somebody put up with this?
So it's really interesting. So there's real heroes and heroines in this. There's teachers that tried. There's an MP that stepped in. And yet you differentiate school from the system. So what do you see as the system then?
The system is that everybody does the same GCSEs and everybody needs them and everybody has to sit an exam. Some people do not thrive in that environment. It crushes them. It crushes their anxiety. They get told they must have a C grade or they must, whatever the equivalent is now, they must, absolutely must. Otherwise, they'll, quote, end up as a bin man. Now, we need bin men or bin women as well. We need people doing all sorts of jobs in this world. But also, if you look at some of the most successful people in all sorts of industry, whether it be sport, media, business, a lot of them, the most successful people, have jack shit. They have no qualifications. What they have is what they don't teach in school, and that is passion and drive. What they teach you to do is to follow a system and sit an exam and get your brown envelope and open that brown envelope. And in that moment, because of everything they've been told for 5 years at secondary school, they'll look at it and they'll either think, brilliant, I'm going to get a job, or they'll think I'm a failure. And that's the other dangerous element, is just because you've got a brown piece of paper with loads of qualifications that are fantastic, that don't guarantee you a job. You know what I mean?
You remind me, because from being as young as I can remember, I only ever wanted to go to university. And that's because my dad was a university lecturer. I had no concept of what university equipped you for or what I would study, but I was going to get to university. I got to university. I had 3 of the worst, most terrible years of my life. University was such an underwhelming experience. I ended up with 4 jobs. I had £4,000 in the bank at the end of university. I came out with a decent 2-2 on the basis that I spent 10 weeks with Pro Plus and somebody else's photocopying notes to get that degree. But the world of work, once I got into the world of work, I never looked back. And I thought I would love it. And I just hated it. And it gave me the motivation to get out of it and beyond it. So sometimes you just set yourself up for these expectations of how it's going to be. But I was tremendously well resourced through that time because I had to do something, other my sanity depended upon it. Because organic chemistry and physical chemistry was never, ever going to be my thing. I was struggling at 13. So distilling down the gold in the dark for you out of this, I mean, there's so many nuggets in what you've said there, but what would you say from this in times, pretty dark times, that you sit now at a 19-year-old with your own company, or, you know, with employing people, highly successful, you know, what would you say those are for you?
Gosh, determination. I think that's the biggest thing I learned from school, and resilience. That people around you are always going to have something to say, and I come across that now as well. You know, and it was the resilience that no, I know who I am, and you're not going to change me. I'm not going to change just because I don't fit your mold. But yeah, I have to have that now in my line of work as well. I mean, anyone who's got a business, right? People just think, oh, you've got a business, you live an easy life. No, that's so far from reality. And, you know, I go home, I still actually live with my parents. I'm using and abusing that for sure. But I'm never there, and which is quite sad, actually. I'm always here, there and everywhere, London, Manchester, spend a lot of time in Glasgow as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm responsible for people putting food on their tables and people paying their mortgage. And that resilience is really important, because when the going gets tough, you know, the tough gets going.
They want you.
And they want me to be there, and they want me to think, right, we're going to get past this. You know, we never really lost we've lost a couple of clients, but not usually through our work, but more so their scenario. But we'll find another. You know, when you lose one client, there's always another 5. You know, we're in a very fortunate position where we get a lot of leads. We get a lot of people get in touch wanting to work with us, and we kind of cherry pick who we want to work with, because I base all of my work off people. Am I going to get on with you? And are you going to accept that I'm a 19-year-old managing director, and you're not going to talk down to me, and you're not going to be condescending, and we'll do you a bloody good job? That is how I cherry pick my clients, and honestly, it works.
I'm sure it does, because people want that ballsiness, and they want that confidence, and they want that pushback, because you're out there fighting for them as a client, aren't you, as well?
Exactly, and I owe a lot to my clients. You know, one of my first retained clients was in the healthcare sector, and it was June 2020, right? That was in the height of COVID, and they're a home care provider. So they hundreds of carers they have in Cumbria, and hundreds of clients. That industry was all over the media. They trusted a then 16-year-old to manage their brand and direct their communications in the height of a global pandemic. And we done it, and we done a bloody good job. I had them on BBC News, I had them on Radio 5, I had them all over the regional media, and I also helped them craft the correct messaging through the vaccine rollout. That's such a divisive subject. And I was a 16-year-old. Yeah, this business has been here for 20 years, and they're handing it to me.
So they handed it to you. Can you think of any subject at school or any part of your life that equips a 16-year-old to know what to say on to the national media about a vaccine rollout in a global pandemic?
No, I think I'm an expert at winging it, to be perfectly honest. Winging it and a bit of BS. I think that's my way in life. And no, in all seriousness, I think I've grown up consuming the media. I mean, I'm still obsessed with the newspaper. I just blum and love it. You know, I love the fact that there's all these stories in this little book.
But do you actually physically buy newspapers, or is it all...
I've been in the office this morning. Did you not see them all over the shelves? I mean, they might be 2 years old, but I keep them there just to go in line with the work we do.
It's a museum item.
I'm joking. We keep big client coverage when clients are in the press. We keep obviously that for the media monitoring piece. But we're a very digital agency as well. You know, we have an arm of our business which is social media content creation. So we're very forward-thinking, modern PR, using all those digital channels. But I just love a good old newspaper. The smell of them as well. It just smells like the news, you know. But I grew up consuming that, listening to the radio all the time, watching the news. I mean, I always used to be obsessed with the behind the scenes of it as well. I can remember the first time I went up to BBC Radio Cumbria. Gosh, I've done that countless times now. But I can remember the first time I went. I think it was about 15. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like this. What is this? This is a microphone? Can I have a play on the microphone? You know, I was like, who are you? Can I take your email? You know, I might want to send you a press release. And if I look at the press releases I wrote when I was a 14 and 15-year-old compared to now, God, I honestly don't have a clue how I've got to where I am today. But they've come on leaps and bounds for sure. But yeah, like companies like, that healthcare client who are still with us now, like 3 years down the line, I love them. I bloody love them. And, nothing's ever went, touch wood, nothing's ever went wrong. And I think it's about truth, honesty, and integrity. And I have a lot of integrity with what I do. I do things because I love my industry. I don't do it because it's good money, I'm not going to beat it around the bush, obviously. PR can be lucrative, but you have to do a good job for it to be lucrative. And we really do cherry pick our clients. I want to work with people who are experts, who are also people's people, and are doing it because they love it, right? I think that's the biggest thing in life. We're only here once. Me and you, we're all only here once. Why bother doing something for years and years and years that is just a tick box exercise? And I understand, and I will say this, obviously some people don't have that choice. Some people aren't as privileged as me, that's still living at home. I don't have a mortgage, but it's quite funny. I don't have a mortgage, and I don't pay the water bill at home, but I have probably quadruple expenses in all the other members in that household a month. With the business and things. But it's all different. Everyone's very different. But I think my privilege is definitely that I live at home and I've got a ridiculously supportive family.
Yeah, and that's the base and the strength from which you can flourish and grow, isn't it? So let's move on to the third question, consistent with the Gobsmack podcast. So can you remember a world event which left an indelible mark on you?
Yes, I can. Now, I was only born in 2003, so you could argue there hasn't been really many major world events. Biggest one was middle of March, around the 20th of March, I think, in 2020. Boris gets himself on the TV down the line, right, you aren't leaving your homes. And from that, right, the rest is history. What a few years it's been. We still talk about COVID. We all still talk about COVID, of course we do. But about a week after that is when I actually launched Platinum Live. So I had £25 in my bank account, 12 of it. And for those who have set up limited companies will know what I'm about to say. The £12 went on registering the company with Companies House. And I went, oh shit, I used to be obsessed. I want my name on Companies House, and now I'm like, get my bloody name off there. It's I just want it to be on this website. It's good for SEO. And now I'm like, oh gosh, realise what it actually means. But no, in all seriousness, watching that unfold and the leadership that went on, and politics aside, I mean, who could have predicted what happened in a global pandemic like that? Nobody in our lifetime has ever dealt or led a team or an organisation or a company through, or a country through that kind of a challenge and a crisis. And I was watching it constantly and I was thinking, this is interesting. And I was absorbing the media all the time and how everything was changing and adapting. And I went, you know what? I'm going to change and adapt. I've got nothing. What can we do? And I really capitalised on the fact that everybody was sat at home. And I just wouldn't shut up about myself and our company. I was, I'm going to make sure everybody in West Cumbria knows that this guy has left school and he wants to help your business grow.
From your back bedroom, like the rest of us, though.
Oh, yeah. Driving the whole family insane, Guys, can you just leave the ground floor? I'm about to do a television interview. You're all going to have to go upstairs and turn all your other phones off because it'll affect the Wi-Fi quality. Yeah, that happened quite a lot. I used to get some funny looks from my dad and my stepmom and my stepbrothers. But yeah, they put up with my nonsense. And now they don't have to because we're obviously in the office and on the road all the time. But yeah, the other thing is, I didn't drive until last August and September. So just getting around was a nightmare. I relied on so many people. There's so many people, I could thank for the last few years, genuinely people who have drove me all around, because in Cumbria, you've got clients the bottom of a mountain all over the place, You can't just get a train. And even with the trains now, they're all, they're quite unreliable. But yeah, it's what a whirlwind it's been. But yeah, definitely that world event has got to be COVID. It's when I matured through COVID. I became an adult. I became a person and, discovered who I was and what I stood for as well. And then I started thinking, I wanted to surround myself with inspirational and motivational people, And I have said goodbye to some people in my life over the last couple of years. People who aren't adding value, and by that I don't mean commercial value. I mean adding value to my thoughts and my feelings and how I spend my time, And I think even working with Gary, right? Meeting you, meeting Amy, meeting John and Catherine, and all these wonderful people. They're my kind of people, and by meeting them, it's allowed me to cherry pick the friends my own age as well, and actually I want friends like you lot as well, and I think that's been really successful for me personally on a personal level. I'm a workaholic, I live for Sunday night. Can't wait for Monday morning, and when it's like a bank holiday, when we had like Friday off and the Monday off, I was like, what the hell? Like, no, like, why is no one replying to my emails? Or in August now, we're in the height of summer season, and I send an email
Are
to
we?
I sent an email to 6 people, and 5 of them have the out of office on. I'm like, guys, no, like, sorry, but the world doesn't stop because the kids are off, and that's my like young, ambitious, arrogant side, where I'm like, excuse me, you're having a holiday. But yeah, I am a workaholic, so having a really supportive friendship and people around me is obviously really important.
So looking at the COVID, so you launched your company at the beginning of COVID, which doesn't feel the most intuitive thing to do, but let's roll on. And then we all sit round the telly at 5 o'clock, don't we? So it was, if you look at it through the lens of PR and comms, a most incredible time. And certain of our leaders maybe haven't stood this test of scrutiny at this moment in time, but how did you perceive them as communicators? What was Boris to you at that time?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's obviously a lot of things have come out and he's not as clean as what we potentially thought back then. But as a communicator, excellent, because what I also noticed he was doing, and this has come out in recent interviews and things, he will go on the podium and say something which his team are like, we can't deliver that. But because he said it to the public and he said it to the cameras, they will have that amount of testing a week, that he will make it happen. And the communication, I think, for the first few months was quality. Compared to other countries, we were on top of keeping people informed, and I actually felt like if people were honest, the majority of the country also think that, because there was a sense of togetherness for about 2.5 months. But then come June 2020, we all just went back to how we were and hated each other. But for the first couple of months, there genuinely was this is shit, let's all get together, and there was, and, those who doubt it, well, they can doubt it all they want, but there definitely was a sense of togetherness, and I know there was in my community. People running around doing errands for the vulnerable, people jumping up and down and, really spotlighting the heroes and the frontline workers and people who in the events industry go in to be delivery drivers, or people in the hospitality industry go in to volunteer at the vaccination centres, the testing centres and then the vaccination centres. There really was everybody mucked in, and I think that was the true British culture.
So what's really interesting is that after Gen Z, I don't know what they're going to call it, but it could possibly reflect the word COVID after, Gen X, Gen Z. But that time has cost younger generation people, kids, young children, through that communication skills, interpersonal, emotional intelligence, because it's knocked some people or young children back in their development. Yet, for you, it was a time of inspiration, business building, amazing time that you look at, almost with some fondness.
Yeah. Honestly, I think COVID was a blessing for me. And I don't mean that obviously in the impact that it had on people's health and well-being and the amount of people that we lost, of course, I don't mean that. But I mean that time of everybody being at home, I was really thinking, what do I want to do? And I said, you know what, I want to work in this industry. I want this. I really want this, And I think when you realise you genuinely want something and you saying, right, I'm going to do whatever it takes to have an office by the time I'm 18. Got one when I was 17. I'm going to do everything it takes to hire people. Done that when I was 17.
It sounds like natural goal setting to me.
Yeah, goal setting. I think one of my ones that I always mention as well is I wanted to be on Radio 1 by the time I was 25. I spent a week on Radio 1 with Adele Roberts when I was 16. And I set that goal when I was 15.
It is. This is your life. But it's a gobsmacked after a gobsmacked after a gobsmacked. If you just recount the last 4 years alone, you've lived 3 lifetimes in 4 years practically. And you've gone through the one defining global experience that we've all gone through. So bringing you to our final question today, a quote, a book, a film, or piece of communication that has left a real impact on you. What would you like to share with us?
Good things don't come from comfort zones. And I think you can take from that what you will. And initially 5 years ago when I was in school, I was a very anxious, anxiety-riddled teenager and quite depressed. Walking into school wasn't my comfort zone, but also back then walking into a boardroom with 20 people and trying to talk to them about PR was not in my comfort zone. But now I've really adapted myself and I've grown in buckets and spades of confidence, and now comfort zones. I don't let it get in my way. I really go for it, and that is what I would say. Nothing easy, nothing worth it in life came easy. I think we've got to graft. We really have got to graft, regardless of whether we're from a silver spoon background or not, or we're from a deprived background, or from a family who have nothing to do with your industry. You've got to work hard. We're only here once, and we don't all have the same opportunity. Some people have an advantage, but for the bulk of us, we've got to graft. And it means we have to put ourselves in difficult scenarios, and we have to put ourselves in uncomfortable settings. But, get out of your comfort zone and you'll do.
Comfort zone is poorly named, I think, because when you're in comfort zone, when you're not being stretched, brains need to be green and growing. They don't need to be ripe and rotting. And if you're not fulfilling your potential, if you're not living the life you're meant to, it's like having a woodpecker encased in your skull. It taps away and causes disruption. But it's the sort of perversity, really, that the more comfortable you get, the more fearful you get about the status quo. And I think what's so refreshing about your story is there's no part of it you say, it's not an entitlement thing. You've made your luck. You've seen your opportunities. You've not gone the conventional path, but you've turned it into something. And you've got that wonderful convergence points where your love and passion and talent converge with a bit of decent graft and some good opportunities.
Yeah, I also don't think luck is a thing. I think luck's a thing when you win a raffle. That's luck. Or when you win the lottery. But you don't get lucky in business. Everything I do is strategic. I put certain bricks in place to build a wall. There's certain things that go on, and I think that's the case for anybody in their career. Look, I don't believe in it. I believe in it if you win the lottery.
Well, I always am much more fascinated by a story where somebody's made $1 million and lost it. Because if you've made $1 million and lost it, at least you know how you made the $1 million. If you win money on the lottery, all you know is that you've been lucky.
Yeah.
There's no residual learnt experience, is there, in that?
No.
But if it's a life-changing sum of money, at least you've got the option to potentially spend it wisely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's worth mentioning. The other company that I have, which is the festival company, and we've got a pretty major festival that happens in September in Whitehaven, which I started last year, and that's doing 6 figures. That's doing crazy numbers, but it's all going back out again. But the essence of that is, I've known how to get to that point. I've known which people to bring in and how to build it, and answering the demand of the public, which they wanted a festival. But technically we're spending it all again, and it's that constant graft and that effort, and it's not luck. Doing festival work and promoting a festival and putting it on. My God, that's much harder than the PR agency.
So as we almost conclude Gobsmack today, I will be at the festival. So who am I likely to be rooking down with and getting,
Me and you, Catherine, will be smoozing with Mr. Tiny Temper, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, Boney M, Jake Bug, the vaccines, the real thing, Bajon again.
There's a few generationals in there.
Well,
the real thing.
They'll be mixing with us. We won't be mixing. They'll be mixing with us. They'll be in our hospital.
Oh, of course, you're PR, aren't you, darling?
Yeah.
Very fact.
Yeah, gosh, it's gonna be fabulous.
Oh, Oliver, it's just been wonderful having time with you today. Before we conclude our time together, we're both aware of the very sad passing of Bill Arnott, isn't it? Bill's Brews. So we know Bill because of Gary's 365 marathon run. And every single day without fail, Janet, Bill would be there with cakes. And they became an indelible part of that experience, didn't they? We've all supped at the cup of hospitality at Bill's Brews. So we're dedicating today's podcast, aren't we, to Bill and his family, Bill's Brews, because that cup of tea was the stuff of legacy. The moments where Gary was really up against it on his 365 marathon, at least he knew that there was always going to be a smiling face and a piece of cake. So R.I.P. Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you, Oliver.
You're welcome.